I'm out here, I've told everybody I think, but there's snacks back there, so if you help yourself, please. And now I'd just like to welcome our Executive Director, Mary Kelly.
Thank you, Alice. For everybody that does not know me, I'm Jim Kelly, I'm the Executive Director for First Colony. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We have a program. Dr. Todd Watson is going to basically go through a presentation, explain to you essentially the challenges that we're facing in regards to the turf and tree issues. Talk about the area that we're looking at, talk about his study and his recommendations, and basically, once his presentation is over, we'll open it up for questions. And at that point, we'll go to the question and answer period. So if you will please, hold your questions to the end, and then we'll work our way through the room and hopefully get everybody's questions answered. If we don't have the answer, I will get back in touch with you in the next day or two and get you an answer to your question. But please, we want to try to keep the focus on the issue at hand. If you have some other concerns, you can see myself or other staff following the presentation. And as I said, we will get back with you and answer whatever those concerns may be following me in the next day. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Todd Watson. I'd go through all the initials at the end of his name, but I think he's more qualified to basically explain to you what that means. He's got a whole litany of those. He has done a lot of work for First Colony through the years. And just kind of a background intro, First Colony's been looking at this particular challenge for the last 10 years. They have done numerous tests, numerous mitigation efforts have been undertaken. Some good, some didn't turn out real well, but they've gone through a test series. And that leads us to where we are today, and it leads us to Dr. Watson. Let's start.
Make sure this works? Yeah, it does. Good evening. So, y'all are interested in trees? We're going to talk about trees a little bit tonight. So, I'm going to stand out here so you don't have to watch a talking podium. So, there ought to be some law against the podium guys. Some ADA. This is not ADA compliant. As Mr. Kelly said, this is something we've been kind of working on for 10 years. It's been about 10 years or so ago that I came to First Colony to be a consultant for tree and landscape issues. One of the first things that I saw is what we're going to talk about tonight. We've been talking about it ever since then, trying to figure out, what's the best way to tackle this problem. Because it is a problem. It is a growing problem. Because every year the trees get bigger, which makes this problem more difficult and more expensive. Every time the clock ticks, the problem keeps growing. So we have to do something. If you also notice in the title it says solving. So we actually have a solution for this. May or may not be popular. So what I'm going to do is kind of take you through this of what we've been doing the last 10 years, more intensely the last 5 years, trying to find some options for dealing with the problem. And we'll kind of talk about the problem. I have some slides in here that you don't have because I'm a teacher and I just can't help it. So I keep thinking of some stuff that I need to throw in. So I thought the slides you have are basically the report that I wrote without having to read all the words. But I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background in thinking about trees, just very briefly, and how we kind of got to this situation. So about 30 years or so ago, this isn't First Colony, but this was kind of the idea for First Colony, right? Is to plant trees, plant a lot of trees, and other landscape plants so we can sell houses. Right? So we've got beautiful streets, and trees are small when they are planted. And so what landscape architects typically do on most projects is just plant a lot of them. And I've even heard that the thought was, okay, we're going to space these trees 20 feet apart. So if you look around, most of the trees in First Colony are 20 feet apart. And at some point in the future, then we're going to remove every other tree as they grow. Well, we're kind of in that situation. So, thanks a lot for leaving us that problem to try to deal with. But that's a good strategy. But that's kind of where we are. So, and that happens. Anybody here that's from another community, you've got the same issue. It's in all the different communities. This doesn't apply just to live oaks, but let me talk about live oaks for a minute. To kind of end some of the confusion about Why do we need to thin trees? These are live oaks. This is a mott of live oaks. If you're familiar with how live oaks grow naturally in motts. And you've got a lot of small trees that all come up. And in motts, they all have connected root systems, so they're all genetically the same. But over time, as the trees grow, due to competition, they've got grafted root systems, and so they're pulling nutrients out of other trees, they're shading other trees. Then that grouping of 10 or 20 trees that were small and planted close together ends up being 2 or 3 trees over time as they start to. This is just what's occurring naturally. And I'm mentioning this because, you know, master plan community is not natural, right? It's planned by us. But we're still, you know, constrained by the laws of nature. So we still have to understand what's happening in nature. So then we can try to figure out what we're going to do about it. And then over time, if we have enough space, and if we have enough time, now we get live oaks that look like this. And there's nothing around them. There's no grass around them because there's no light underneath. There's you know, no vegetation around it. There's no other live oaks. This is the winner. This is the one that won the you know, there can be only one. So you get one big one. So that's our future. That's what we're heading for, with a whole lot of other stressful factors that are surrounding us. Which brings us to the problem. Basically, the problem in most areas is we have large trees, live oak-sized large trees that mature live oak has a canopy that's 150 feet wide. And so we have these trees, and now they're teenagers. I have 3 teenagers in mine. I don't recommend it. You kind of have similar problems with trees too, because then they start not getting along, they're selfish, they're fighting each other for resources, and, you know, something eventually is going to happen. So we've kind of got that problem now. We've got trees that are maturing, they need more space, and bad things are happening. So let's look at some of the bad things that are happening, and then we'll talk about things that we've tried to do to fix this problem. This is typical. You've seen this situation if you live in First Colony or been through First Colony. We've got trees, now they're teenagers, we can't grow grass under them. The shade is so dense that we can't grow grass underneath them. And so it's becoming a big problem. It's causing, well, I'll give you a list of some of the problems it's causing. In addition to this, I'm a tree hugger, right? So I'm not here the tree killer. I don't look like Todd the tree slayer. But I'm here as a tree hugger. How can we save trees? Well, when we look at this, trees need a vast amount of resources. Because a tree, if you look at a tree's root system, you look at the top of the tree, most people have a misconception of how trees look, but they look like a wine glass on a dinner plate. That root system spreads well beyond that. If it's a wine glass, the cup is the canopy, the stem is the trunk, and then the dinner plate's the root system. So naturally, that root system spreads way beyond the canopy because it needs to mine the soil, a lot of soil, for water and minerals. Well, in urban areas, we have a lot of restricted rooting areas. And so they're automatically stunted. And if you look at this, and I apologize, the ambient light's making these dark, so they're normally a lot crisper than this. These are willow oaks. I think in this picture they've been planted about 6 or 7 years. They were the same size, planted at the same time from the same nursery, and they were all put in. You can see these trees are much bigger than these. The only difference is these trees are growing in a grass lawn, which I don't know if you can see. I can't see it from here. So they've got a greater area to explore for water and minerals, and so therefore they're growing faster. These are planted in about 6-foot diameter tree wells. So they're sort of in a big pot, and they have a small area of soil to explore for water and minerals, and it's affecting their growth rate. At some point in time, they'll end up dying. And so we have a similar situation. Every time I look at this, I think about, this is a true story. My little brother is 6 feet tall. It's true. I should have shown you a picture. Well, we don't look alike, so you still think I was making it up. But he is, and I keep thinking, you know, because I hear all the, how come your little brother's so much bigger than you? Did he push you away from the table and all those? And I had to think about it. His room was bigger than mine when we were growing up as kids, so I think that's part of the issue. But anyway, we have this problem with trees. So here's what this is the tree hugging part. This is the saving tree part. This is on Palm Royale, and it's happening all over. But we've got trees that are dying. They are starving to death. They are losing the battle because there can be only one. big tree in the end. Now that's more than 100 years away, so I don't think we'll be here at that time. But we need to start thinking that far ahead, because we're already 30 years into this, and these trees are starting to die. So we need to figure out some way to save the trees, because I've talked to a lot of people in First Colony over the years about what you like, and we've had exuberant discussions about the future tree plantings and how First Colony's going to look. A lot of people, you may not be in that camp, but a lot of people like it because it looks like a master plan community. It looks designed, there are straight rows of trees, and everything looks nice and crisp. It doesn't look like the woods, right? Doesn't have that natural look of trees just being in a natural setting. Well, if we don't manage the trees, then we're not going to be able to keep the managed tree look. Because nature is going to decide which trees go if we don't do anything about the trees. And so that look that a lot of people like is going to go away. Because trees are going to, and nature is random, right? Trees are going to die randomly. And so this is a problem, not just to try to save trees, but also try to save the look and the property values and all those things. So just a few things off the top of my head that I threw in there that are part of the problem, or symptoms of the problem. One is the reduced quality and quantity of turf. So we can't grow turf. So some of you may be speciest. I don't care about grass. I like trees. See, that's sort of a Napoleonic complex for me. I just went straight for the big plants. I don't mess with those little, I don't hang out with little plants, you know, I'm gonna hang out with big plants. But it's reducing our turf quality because we got dense shade now in many locations. But it's also decreasing the tree health, as I just mentioned. Because they're being starved to death. There's no humane society for trees. So it's just me and the board. We're the only ones here that are standing up for helping the trees. And that's going to reduce the lifespan of the trees over time as well. And as I mentioned, nature's going to decide which trees go, which is drastically, over time, going to change the way that the community looks, which is going to decrease the aesthetics or the appearance. We're going to have increased erosion because we don't have a ground cover. And so with increased erosion, we've got increased siltation into the stormwater. And I hear rumors, but you know, at some point, who knows what government's going to do at some point in the future, but there may be fines for that coming up. I have heard of instances in other areas where you get siltation during the rains and the roads get slick, and you get increased traffic accidents. Of course, trees dying, no turf, those kind of things are going to decrease property values. Our pest control costs are going to increase because trees are not healthy. So the things that we would do to try to keep trees healthy are going to increase, as well as our tree maintenance costs. Because as the trees get bigger and bigger, our removal costs are going to get more expensive, and lots of things. So there's lots of downsides to this. Okay, so now how do you come up with a solution that fixes all of them and makes everybody happy? Impossible. I've been married for 22 years. It's not possible to make everybody happy all the time. But we went through some options. So let's look at some of the past research that we've done over the last few years to look for options where we can try to have win-win-win-win scenarios if possible. One of the places we looked for shade-tolerant turf grasses and tested some. This one is Manila grass. It's along Brookview at Lexington. And I had high hopes for this one. It was brand new. And nobody knew anything about it other than they said this thing is so shade-tolerant you can grow in a closet. So we thought, great, we'll try that. Because it also looks like Bermuda grass, which is a bonus. Because then we could combine it with Bermuda grass in sunny areas. So we planted this maybe about 6 years ago. This was one of our first tries to grow grass. And it's still sort of, kind of alive. And you can see it, but it's not a great solution. We're still, to this very day, testing shade-tolerant grasses. We've tried Amerishade, St. Augustine grass, which seems to be the most shade-tolerant, but it's not. It doesn't take the dense shade. I just looked at some new test plots today where we've got a Zeon zoysia grass that we're using in a shady esplanade, and a grass that doesn't even have a name yet. It's just got a number because it's under research. They're starting to thin out, so you know it's not looking good. There's just a limit to what you can grow in the dark. Because also think about, we're really doing something opposed to nature. Because if you look at, and if, man wasn't involved kind of changing things up, if you look at nature, you have forest and you have grasslands. And you have a few trees like post oaks and live oaks that survive in a grassland, but there's no grass underneath. But trees and grass don't grow together. Very difficult to do, but people want trees and grass to grow together. So, we keep trying. Anyway, that has not been successful and probably won't unless you like AstroTurf. That's a possibility. We didn't go there to do that. So then we look for, okay, what's more shade tolerant than the most shade tolerant turf grass that we can find? So we started looking at shade tolerant ground covers, which is really expensive. If you really want to have a full ground, the whole area fully covered in a plant, it's a lot more expensive than turf. So we just tried some different options. This is, if I can remember what this one is, this is Old Mill Park. Now, I couldn't remember what it was. This is Old Mill Park. And we're using aspidistra, right? Closet plant. Won't really grow in a closet, but it really grows in dense shade. It's doing fine in those areas, okay? Some bonus, because we're always looking, there's other issues to solve besides this tree issue. One is debris disposal. Great place to put leaves. We can put leaves in this area, and it's improving the soil, which helps improve the health of the plants. The aspidistra around the curb, and we've also used liriate around the curb, helps with the siltation problem. So we've, killed a few birds right there with this type of research. However, it doesn't fix our problem with trees dying. I mean, trees, in areas where we've got trees 20 feet apart, close competition, it's really messing up the canopies, destroying the structure of the canopies, which is reducing the value of the trees and decreasing their health and life expectancy. So, it didn't solve those problems. That didn't stop us. We looked at some other options to try to improve the aesthetics. So we used some shade-tolerant plants, and these all work well. There's a limit to the amount that you can plant underneath trees to be able to hold the soil. This one doesn't hold the soil in place. You can see we've still got areas that are too shady for grass, but we're able to grow plants. And so this helps improve the appearance, but it still doesn't deal with all these trees that are planted too close together and are in stiff competition with each other. So we tried another option, and that's let's deal with the tree. This is more of, we want to be able to grow grass and reduce erosion into the roadways. And is there a way that we can grow grass? So we took some areas and we really thinned the trees. And we've actually got pretty good research on this, and thinning trees is not a good permanent solution. When I say thinning trees, I mean removing some branches in the canopy to allow light to kind of filter through the canopy so we get a little bit more light. Because a tree's job is to grow leaves into the sunlight. So it just starts filling in these places pretty quickly. So it would be something that was very expensive to do. Another option is raising limbs so we get more sunlight from the side and shortening them as well. There's a limit to that. This was along Sweetwater. And still, after doing this for a few years, look, we're not any better off. We're dealing with the erosion problem, being able to grow grass, making it look prettier, and we're still running out of space. I mean, if we had the money, we could grow these like a bonsai plant, right? If you've ever done bonsai, that is very labor intensive to grow big trees in little bitty small planters, and it's just outside the capability of what can be done in urban forest management. So we've done some midnight tree removals. Not really. But doing a little tree removal because this is really the solution. This solves all the problems that we have. Just nobody wants to remove trees. I don't want to remove trees either. So this one is, if I can remember, this is over on Elkins Park for this particular area. And I'm giving you some, sometimes you wish you were smart enough to take pictures of stuff before you did it instead of after. But if you look at after, you have this strong urge that you need to plant more trees in that spot. After we removed a lot of trees. Let's look down Elkins. Would you believe that down this street, more than 100 trees were removed? It doesn't look like it's hurting for trees. So we help reduce the competition so that the trees that are there are doing better, and We got enough light to grow grass. We still have tree-lined streets. Things are great. And these trees are still teenagers. They're still too close together. But we removed a lot of trees and at least alleviated the problem in the short term on that. This is a Christmas on the Green. When I first saw this, there are 4 live oaks left and there's only space for 1. But we didn't get to the 1, right? But if you had 1 live oak planted in the center, it would rub the shingles off of the sides of the houses eventually. But we left 4. There were 12 here when I started. It was a muddy mess. So you can add to the negatives liability for First Colony from someone slipping in the mud and crashing and burning on the sidewalk. So it was a mess. Hardly any grass would grow underneath here. So now we have trees, we have shade, we have grass, it's safer, we've improved the aesthetics just by removing trees. Just that you don't want to see it happen. You kind of want to see it about 5 years later after it happens. So, sort of phase 2, after looking at all of our different research, unless something else comes to mind, and we're still looking at options, the best option is, and if you see this word, what the heck does roguing trees mean? It just means removing undesirable, unnecessary trees. It sounds less bad than removing. And if I said thinning out trees, that can create confusion. You might think thinning tree canopies rather than removing some trees to do some proper thinning on them. And if we look at thinning, let's take live oaks are some of the most difficult to deal with. One is they have widespreading canopies, so they cover a lot of area. 2 is they're evergreen. They're only without leaves about 2 weeks out of the year, and so they're always shading. I mean, you have a difficult time growing ryegrass in the wintertime. And so they're one of the ones that really shades out the turf. Oh, so let me finish that thought. So live oaks, the minimum spacing, and this is in an area where you've got lots of soil, so that it can explore a lot of soil. Minimum spacing on live oaks is 40 feet. Now, if it's going to have let's just say it has a mature canopy. I've measured canopies that were 180 feet on live oaks, big ones, but let's just say 100. 40 feet is too close. I mean, their branches are distorting the canopies together. But 40 feet is kind of what we're shooting for. So if you've got trees spaced 20 feet apart, you've got some options for doing that. So we looked at several different test areas, places where we might put in a test to start really do this on a bigger scale, but not just start doing it willy-nilly to First Colony. Let's do something that we can get our cost on. We can measure how well the trees look, that the remaining trees that are left, how well they look, how quickly the grass is covering in and growing well, what the public perception is of this, what our cost is if we want to do this long term. How long is this going to take before people say, man, we should have done that 10 years ago? And so this is kind of our bigger, more intensive test site to be able to look at this. So this is an area along Edgewater, which has no grass in much of the area. There was also some issues there. Like I said, we're trying to develop as many wins as we can. So one of the issues was safety, because the trees were blocking the street lights. And so when we looked at, okay, which trees to remove, we paid special attention to street lights and signs, because this is near a school. So if we can improve safety, as well as improve the appearance and health of the trees, that's all a good thing. Also at this site, nature's starting to do nature's thing. And trees are starting to die willy-nilly through this site. There's a reason that grass is growing here. It's because a few trees have already died in this site. So if we don't start doing something, this is going to continue, and it's going to lose the look in this area. So what can we do to start managing it so that we don't continue to have more trees that die from starvation? So we developed a plan, and this is went out and we marked the trees on a plan. We marked the street lights, as you can see. on the plan as well, so we can kind of decide how we're going to eat this elephant. And figured out that the best way to do this was to look at trees along setbacks. Because tree spacing was not what we would like in the Esplanades, but if we can just, in the Esplanade. So we got a few of them that needed to be removed, and then we looked at, because we're going to think about tree canopies. We want these tree canopies to develop into beautiful, well-shaped canopies, and so that also has an impact on which trees you remove, right? So that they alternate between those. So a lot of thought and work went into which trees to remove. We looked at which trees might have health problems, and other things as well. And one of the things we considered too, I didn't mention this in the disadvantage. I don't want to send people running, screaming out down the street. But when I first got here, one of my big fears was oak wilt. For those of you who've heard of oak wilt, you've heard of Dutch elm disease? Oak wilt is that devastated the elms in the Midwest and in the East. Oak wilt is our Dutch elm disease. Actually, they're first cousins to each other. It is west of us. You've probably heard about what it's doing in Austin, Dallas, and Fort Worth, different places. It's now in Single Ranch. So it keeps getting closer and closer. So another benefit of doing this, the closer we have susceptible oak trees together, the more likely that if and when oak wilt comes in, that it'll devastate first colony. So we kept those kind of things in mind as well. So that after the trees are removed, we still got a lot of trees along Edgewater that are well spaced and allow enough room for the trees to grow, as well as to allow some grass to grow beneath them. We're also taking the opportunity in this area to upgrade the irrigation system, because one of the things that we want to do is to improve our irrigation efficiency, because irrigation water is going way up. So if we can also test that in this area and find ways to save money and to save water, because it's really getting to be a critical issue. One of the things that we've done in this area is along the wall, where you would normally have spray heads, and spray heads spray on the sidewalk. It's really hard in that narrow area to keep them from spraying on the sidewalk, which increases liability from somebody early in the morning walking down the sidewalk, slipping and falling. You've got water that's putting salt and calcium deposits on the wall that you got to clean and all those things. So in this area, we're using drip irrigation. And we've already got a test plug in with the drip irrigation in this area. It's working really well to save money on irrigation water, to reduce liability, to reduce maintenance costs on this. We took out all the irrigation folks and the tree folks, and we talked about how to use an air excavation tool to actually dig the trenches for the irrigation system so that we could put the irrigation lines underneath the roots without having to cut the roots. This isn't going to be a great thing if we put in this great site and redo the irrigation system, and now the trees are trying to recover from a lot of root damage. So all of that was taken into consideration as well, to see how many birds we can kill with one stone with this, and make the property look better and have less maintenance. One of the things too that we've talked about a little bit, and I'm still considering, is maybe looking at a lower maintenance turf in this area, and that's based on some of the tests we're doing with zoysia to also decrease our maintenance costs. So let me give you two last slides that you don't have in your slides, because I thought about this, because really you're wondering, what do I expect? You know, because you can't glue trees back to the stump once they're cut off. What kind of things should I expect? Over at New Territory, and I asked their permission to do this, and unfortunately I don't have before slides. But this is along Gateway. If you're familiar with the Gateway entrance at New Territory, this is after the trees were removed. They had a slew of trees. They still need to remove a bunch more trees, but at least they removed about half of the trees. And this was, I went to Google and took a street view. This is the closest I could get to a before photo. It's not before. But look, you can see the grass is not growing. You can see where the trees were, but how the canopies are distorted and there's no grass growing. This was 2011. This was right after the trees, I think the trees were moved at the end of 2010. So right after. So you look at it and you go, yeah, it looks a little bare in that. And that's the kind of thing to sort of expect in the short run for Edgewater is it's going to look different. It's going to be a little bare. We're going to get some white in. There's going to be some canopies that are kind of distorted because of the other trees that were there. Went back to Gateway, took a picture 2014. No grass was planted here. What we're talking about at Edgewater is planting grass because we figure people don't really want to wait. They want to feel good a little bit faster than that. No grass is planted here. It grew back in by itself. And pretty quickly. Now you look at that, I would say that that is better looking, has more landscape value, and all the other things. We've dealt with the siltation problems. We've dealt with all the problems, and increased the lifespan of the trees, and at least temporarily, somewhere down the road, probably some more trees need to be removed. But this is not as terrible as it first sounds. And there is, it's like bad haircut. It takes a little bit of time to grow out of that. So just some conclusions that we talked about. Nothing is done to solve the tree problem. Your costs are going to increase. The aesthetics are going to decline. We've kind of kicked the can down the road. We've actually done work in that time to try to prepare for today. But this is the problem's not going to go away. We've investigated thoroughly numerous solutions or half solutions to this problem, and the only way to mitigate all the negative effects is to do some tree rugging. Selectively pick the trees that need to be removed before nature does it. The test plot gives us an opportunity, like I said, to measure costs and benefits, and if you want to brag, you become a model for other communities, because everybody's struggling with this. I always get asked all the time, how far should trees be spaced apart? What can we do? How do we help? How do we try to manage the trees? Because no one wants to see trees go away, but everybody wants the trees to be better and healthier. So anyway, that's kind of Reader's Digest version, I guess, of what's going on in the project.
Okay, thank you all for coming tonight. Now, we're going into questions and answers, hopefully some answers. Either myself or Dr. Watson. I only have one mic, so what I'm going to have to do is bring it to you. We'd like to hear where you live in First Colony. Please introduce yourself, and then we'll work on your questions. So first, please. Yes, ma'am.
Hi everyone, I'm Kay Abu Said and I'm the representative for Sweetwater. I live in Sweetwater in Denny Boulevard. It's a good thing I came tonight because I had the tree guy this morning and he was trying to cut the trees. I have about 9 trees, 4 are pecan and the rest is live oak. They've grown, like you said, they've just been monstrous. And I have areas in the grass that are dying. But when he started to cut, I got nervous and I told him to wait till Thursday, to wait till I come here tonight. And I'll tell you why, because the trees are spread vertically and horizontally. And he was starting to cut from the vertical, so the horizontal branches are like this. And my question to you is, when you try to trim your trees, what is the best way to trim them so you get the light and you get the canopy to still look good? Do you try to go up high and cut the ceiling of the tree, or do you cut the horizontal spread?
Okay. Most of the tree pruning that's done, can y'all hear me okay? Do I need a microphone? No, you don't. I'm loud. Okay. So, most of the tree pruning that's done in First Colony is usually crown raising, mostly because of the tree ordinance. And as a matter of fact, First Colony came up with a brilliant idea to do all your residential street trees, to raise them up the street, and won a statewide award. It's the best idea I ever heard of. So, for your situation where you're looking at grass, thinning them doesn't help. There's different types of pruning. There's crown thinning, and that doesn't really provide enough light to the bottom. There's crown reduction, pruning them down to the top that you were talking about. That also doesn't help leave with light. The only thing that helps get more light is
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Pat Newton, and I live in Lakes of Edgewater, and I have several questions. First, in reading your whole proposal, if I understand correctly, 29 trees are involved, and the cost for the trees and the grass is $69,000. Is that correct?
About 29 trees is correct. I'm not sure about the cost. Maybe.
45 and 29, 45 and 34.
That's the last number I've heard.
We are going to remove, the plan right now stands at removing 29 trees. There's 64 trees that are standing on the site now. So we're removing 29. We're also looking at 4,550 square yards of turf to be installed. With the irrigation changes, we are currently right now, I've gone back to contractors to get the bids, so we're firming that number up. But that was the initial cost estimate.
And I will say that if we had done this 10 years ago, that tree removal cost would have been about close to half of what it is now, because trees grow exponentially.
Well, I've lived in the community since Lakes of Edgewater was built in 1989. The reason that I moved to that community was the trees. I'm so strongly opposed to cutting down any of the trees, period, because not only are you impacting those trees, but you're impacting a huge ecosystem. I don't know if anybody's noticed or recognized, but there are great blue heron that nest in those trees that you're talking about destroying. And the wetlands area that is near that community, actually in Lakes of Edgewater, is a designated wetlands by the Corps of Engineers. The great blue heron, I'm sure you know, are a protected migratory bird species, and it really bothers me that not all of that is being explored as well. I couldn't care less if there was a stitch of grass underneath. Yeah, I want to know what the cost is in Old Mill Park of doing exactly the same thing that seems to be successful there, where you're talking about cutting down the trees.
I will say, on the heron, the blue heron, is that nesting recent?
Oh, yes, sir, in the last 4 years.
Oh, that recent. We looked for those. We looked for those kind of things. I didn't see them, so if you'll let me know where they are, we'll take a look.
We went out, we looked, Doug looked today. And just as a point of clarification, we will conform to all regulatory restrictions. That's a given. We will not take any action that doesn't adhere to those. So of course, we will look at those issues. The bottom line to this is we're not removing all the trees. We're removing some of the trees. So there still will be an extensive habitat available.
And the main goal is to improve the health and longevity of the trees, not the turf. But the turf is an important benefit.
I'm Sue Burns, and I'm in Lakes of Edgewater also. Are you going to tell us what your test plot is going to use as a criteria? I guess you say you're going to measure costs and benefits, but are you going to share more of that information with the whole community? Because I think you're going to want water and,
Absolutely.
sprinklers.
Yes, absolutely. As we get the cost estimates in, all of that will be selected. We're going to have more of these meetings. So as we move closer to actually getting the work done, we're going to get all that solidified. We'll tell you exactly what we're going to do, what type of irrigation, what the cost breakdown is, what we're going to measure. Measure, basically, we have the historical data that tells us what the water use is in those areas, so we already have that baseline. And then we're going to compare it to what we end up doing.
Dr. Watson, nice to see you again. According to FCCSA, pardon my misuse of the term, but that's how I learned it, either you don't know what you're talking about, or you're not trying hard enough. I just recently got a letter from FCCSA about the strip between the curb and my sidewalk. And it told me that we needed to resod it with St. Augustine grass, and that I had 10 days to cure that. So why should Sweetwater Boulevard look like a dog's breakfast, and why can't it be cured in 10 days? Or suffer the fines that they're threatening me with?
I'm going to let them answer that.
Notice how he dodged that bullet. No, and you're absolutely right. And we had said this in one of the town hall, one of the community meetings. It's a challenge for FCCA because we have these land use covenants. They dictate, and the guidelines dictate what the maintenance standards are. And quite frankly, because of the maturation in the open spaces and the right-of-ways, we can't adhere to them. So how can I hold you, right, to the letter of the law? So this is, well, and this is the challenge that the board has been dealing with for a decade.
And who
And
is
now-
going to send this letter that they...
You are talking to. Okay, you are talking to. Now, what we're trying to do is basically come up with the standard. And then we can come to you and all the residents say, okay, look, this works. This works. Okay, and then we can basically go from there. But we have a decade they've been working on this to try to work this issue. So that's where we're at, and you're absolutely right. And that's been a challenge and a concern for the board. Of course, I've only been here 3 months ago.
I was part of the group, the Billboard Maintenance Group, when I was president of another homeowners association when we hired Dr. Watson. So I too have been at this for quite a while, and we have had some very bad decisions made in the removal of the trees, the preemptive strike, if you will. We don't need that. What we need to do is understand what is the best way to address this situation. I like the program that you're using, where you're using the jammer zoysia in the boulevard. It looks like that may be something to deal with. So can I go home and tear up that letter and throw it away?
Yes, for the moment, yes. And we're going to put out a communication. I'm kind of preempting the board of directors on this, so I'm sure I'm going to hear about that. But quite frankly, I have a hard time enforcing a rule against anybody that I myself are not living up to. So we're going to work through that challenge.
Terry, I would not recommend tearing up any letter. I would be.
We have a copy, don't worry.
Email after it's
Yes.
over and tell them.
Yeah,
something
we have copies of all the letters, don't worry.
well, I know.
But you're right. But you know what, tearing them up, some folks do that just to feel better. You know, some
Well,
folks.
after you email a reply, you can tear it.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that was a very good point. Yes, sir.
I'm Alan Gall. I'm also in Lakes Bridgewater subdivision. I like the plan. My grass is also dying under my trees, and I'm looking forward to cutting half of those trees that are along the street. I think our neighborhood requirements are now that we have 2 trees in every front yard, in front of the sidewalk. That's too many trees. So is that going to be modified so we can do this? Oh, good. All right, thanks.
You're welcome. I came from South Carolina. You know that oak tree he showed? That was.
I did that just for you.
I know.
My name's Tim DeRosa. I live in the Woodstream subdivision. 2 years ago, after beating up the association, I got them to change that rule about the 2 trees. The day after they changed it, my 2 trees were cut down. I have 2 oaks left in my front yard, and they're doing a whole lot better. But that leads to the question I'm bringing back to you, Doctor. Number 1, you kept talking about live oaks in your plan. I'd like to hear more about a mixture of variety of trees. You also talked about the denseness of the canopy, presumably of the live oaks. I'm wondering why you're not thinking about trees that have a less dense canopy. Finally, the plans that you showed are where the association controls the center islands and the sidewalk strips. But along Woodstream, those lands are owned by the homeowner out to the street curb. So how are you going to make them conform to plans of thinning trees?
I can answer the tree questions. I'll leave the policy ones.
I'll take the second one.
If you will look, well, let me start out by saying probably the worst street tree, as far as trying to manage it, is a live oak. Because if you look, just like in that picture, all the live oaks want to touch the ground. They're close to the street. They're big. They're very difficult to deal with. They're hard to keep in compliance with the ordinance. All those things. Now, if you look along Austin Parkway,
And the second half of that question, this test area is going to hopefully give us more than just data on the test area. We can start looking at the long term, because you're talking about a community-wide issue. This isn't just Edgewater. This is all of First Colony. And as was said earlier, adjacent communities. So basically what we hope to do, at least my intent for management, we're going to be updating the comprehensive master plan for this community. So part of this would flow into that comprehensive master plan. And along with that is deed restriction enforcement. And basically looking at what are the rules, what are the restrictions, how do we enforce them? And if we need to modify those, then the board will have to make a decision. We'll make recommendations that go along with doing the types of things that the doctor is discussing. But we're just not there yet. But we're headed in that direction, because you're absolutely right. This is community-wide. It's not affecting just FCCA, it's affecting you and your neighbor and the folks 2 or 3 blocks away. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Linda Litz, and I live in Sweetwater Section 1. If you do the tree removals, on the trees that are left, are you going to do crown thinning? Are you going to thin properly, or are you still going to stay with what you currently do?
Probably on those along Edgewater, we'll do some what's called crown cleaning,
Yeah.
which is getting rid of dead, disease, dying. But as far as the crown thinning, that's not in the plans at the moment. And the reason for that is, at least in the short term, is we want to leave as many leaves on the tree as possible
In the beginning.
so that it produces carbohydrates to help grow new roots and grow new shoots to try to get those canopies to spread out. Now, at some point in the future, that may be an option that's looked at, but that's not part of
Well,
initial.
you know, if you look, whether it's River Oaks or wherever, you know, wherever I go, I noticed, and I've taken a lot of pictures of it, you know, they do trim their trees much more proactively, shall I say, and progressively than what we do here as far as canopy thinning and like that. And they do have better grass. Their trees, some of them aren't as close together, some of them are. But that's just one thing that I know that in all of First Colony, it's just not something that's really done a lot. But I think it would be, it's much more beautiful. And you don't have all the dead and, you know, it's just aesthetically much more pleasing.
Right, and I agree with you. Part of the problem is there's over 60,000 trees,
Oh, that I realize.
so you kind of
You just need
run the
full
math on
time.
that one,
Yeah.
but yeah, so, like I said, in the beginning of that project, we just want to leave as many leaves on it as possible. But I work on the roads and
Yeah.
down rice.
But do you think that that's something that we could work toward in the future
Yes.
from an aesthetic standpoint?
Yeah, that would be for them, but I would say my end, yeah.
Yeah, and the health of the tree. I mean, we don't want line tail thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Michelle Posey, and I live in Lakes of Edgewater. And I have to say that I did read your report and study prior to tonight, and saw a lot of benefits to removing the trees. Probably one of the only true benefits that I agree with you on is the safety factor. Because we do have a lot of residents that walk through the night. There's been several accidents on Edgewater where you can't really see the lights. Now, with that said, I've also been there when they did tree trimming, and they barely remove any limbs when they are trimming. So, I mean, I kind of see where you're going, but my question is, why is Edgewater a test subdivision once again?
Versus some other place?
Versus a previous issue we had. But why is Edgewater being the subdivision? If there's lots of areas in First Colony that's having the same issues, why is Edgewater chosen first?
They can probably answer that better. In different areas that we talked about, like I said, I mentioned the light thing because that was coming as a concern. Also, one of the reasons the other test plots that I showed you pictures of are close by, so it's easy for people in First Colony to kind of compare some of those to see pluses and minuses on that. That was already a site where trees are already starting to die because they're starving to death, especially in the Esplanade, not so much on the setbacks because you got people's backyards, so you've got extended rooting areas for that, but more so in the Esplanade and some of those areas. So there were a few factors that were involved. And
is, back to, one of my concerns is what Patty had brought up. We do have a lot of wildlife, and obviously you're not too aware of the studies on that. So how much more studies are you going to do to make sure that that wildlife is preserved? You get a lot of wild birds that fly into that specific area.
Sure. And dealing with trees, I get involved with that a lot, especially down in Galveston, when I was helping them recover from Ike and you know, looking at the nesting sites. I didn't see those when we looked at them, that's why I was asking. It's possible that I missed those. But like, you know, Mr. Kelly said, we're definitely going to follow all the rules and regulations that need to be followed. And the goal is not to decrease the biological diversity, it's actually to increase it, right? And that includes, you know, trees aren't the only thing, and I'm a board certified master arborist, and I said that. But, you know, there's also turf and other underground vegetation that's involved with this, and they also have, you know, arthropods and other communities that are involved with that, but we certainly wouldn't want to get rid of any nesting sites for birds.
Yes, sir.
I'm Leon Anheuser from Hall Lake, and we're also forced to put in 2 trees in every lot. And so whatever happens, as the tree grows up, the grass dies, then we get the letter. Fix your grass, which you know won't grow, so you gotta go pay to trim the tree, then you put in the grass, and the tree grows, and it's a cycle. And when a tree died and was gone, no matter how much we protested, the letters came, you have to do that tree, you have to do that tree, and we know exactly what's going to happen when we have to do that tree. So what we need, and I think everybody needs, is some common sense. We know that tree's going to be too big before we put it in the ground. Too many trees, we know that. So what does it take 10 years to figure that out? We all know it already. I think everybody in here knows it when they plant a tree, if it's going to be too big, and they didn't want to plant it. So we need a program now, somebody sitting down, looking at the subdivisions and saying, hey, we need to change these rules so that we don't overpopulate the trees and cause a problem in the first place. That's what we really need.
There's the rule down.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. We need to be planning for the future and take a look at what we can do, what makes sense and what doesn't. That's essentially what they've tasked me.
John Kaufman, County Park. You mentioned before this is a community issue. What's the relationship with the city of Sugar Land, and who's responsible for some of the trees? Plus also some of these oak trees are registered, and you've cut them down. If they're certain size, you're supposed to replace them with at least 2 other trees. So I just wondering, how is that going to work?
We have been engaged with the City of Sugar Land Public Works on this project, and we will continue to do so. They will be we will run our plans through them, through all the regulators, including the town. So all those types of issues, as they come up, we will address them. The town has been supportive of our actions because they have the same issues. And they're in some of their areas, they're dealing with the same things. So they're looking at us to basically see if this will work. Maybe this is an option. Look at their regulations. As we bump against their regulations, some of these tree issues, they also have some of the same requirements. We're going to have to work closely with them to see if we can get those amended. We have a council member here tonight listening to this presentation, so hopefully he's listening. He has indicated he is supportive and going to work with us. So as those hurdles present themselves, we're going to have to work diligently to get them addressed and set a plan for the future that does, in fact, make sense. So that's what we're going to do. Other question? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. You're close. I'll get it.
Hello, my name is Stratton Meyer. I live in Lakes of Edgewater. I'd like to know if you've done an environmental impact study for the test site along Edgewater, and if so, why weren't the migratory birds included in that test site?
I haven't personally done an environmental impact study. I don't know if anyone else has.
No, I don't. Josh, do you know? No one, I've been here since January, no one has indicated that's a requirement, which I'm sure in my previous experience in South Carolina, the town and those regulators were there telling you before this issue could move forward, we could permit any tree removal, you had to present us with that. But so far, that has not come up, but I will ask that question. I will ask that question. And we will publish that answer. You'll see that as part of the information that we publish, I promise. Yes, ma'am, up front. I was, yeah, you were just too far up front, I'm sorry.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Phyllis Murray. I live in the Wood Spring community. I don't have a question this evening, just a comment that I'd like to make. And it would be regarding the removal of the Bradford pear trees. Wood Spring was selected as one of the test areas for removal of those trees along the levee ditch in our neighborhood. And my only comment to all of you here, the board and other representatives, would be personally, I'm delighted that the board and the staff appropriated the funds for the removal of those trees in our neighborhood. They've been a hazard in terms for not only Wood Spring residents that use that walking trail, but many of you that take that path as an exercise route, either through walking or jogging. I know that we all love our trees here in First Colony. I'm like anyone else. When my family and I moved here 28 to 30 years ago, the tree factor was one of the issues that affected our decision to move out here, besides just the enhanced quality of life that could afford my family. But again, I too am concerned about removal of trees, but I think all of us should bear in mind that we should think about the quality of life for trees also, what benefits them in the long run, and how it will affect our property values in the future.
Any further questions? This is the far back. I should have said you have to meet me in the middle. That's what I should have said. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Maikesha and I'm from Creekshire neighborhood. And my question or concern is much like the gentleman here said about the cycle of plant trees, trees grows up, trim the trees, and the grass is dying. And we've received multiple letters for the violations. And not only violations, you get letters, then you are charged a fine for that. So now when it is a known issue, not just in my neighborhood, but the whole of FCCA, why am I getting a letter that says I have to pay $100 fine if I'm not putting a new grass in, which I have already done multiple times in the past. So when is that letter going to, you are going to send me an update on that I don't have to pay a fine for that? Or what would be amendment to that letter that I received?
As soon as I have an answer. And I'll give you my card, and you can call me. And we'll get, oh, I almost gave you the councilman's card. Actually, you can call me.
And that's the only reason I'm here today, just since everybody's here to figure out.
No, it's a very valid concern. It's been brought up. I'm sure the board is here tonight, all of them, so they're hearing this. And it's an issue that we need to work through. Yes, ma'am. Oh, see that? I got kicked. You saw it?
Just a little background about the bird situation. You may not have known when you came through to do the study and estimate. The birds come in like about a month ago. They come back to the same nests every year, and they like our area because the lake is right there, and they like the dense canopy. So thinning the canopy will impact those birds. They may not come back to that little area that we have right there, but the most birds we have are in the next section of Edgewater. And I did check, and there are 2 trees in the section that you're going to cut down that do have nests in them. So are y'all going to wait until after nesting season, which I think the birds are gone around August. Is that when y'all were going to start cutting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so they might be gone, but it still will impact the next section when y'all get to that. So my last question is, I just did a little mental math. I mean, I'm not a quiz. I may be totally wrong, but if I took, my algebra may be off, but if I said $69,000 to fix 64 trees, and you said you have 60,000 trees in our area that you're going to be dealing with, If you projected that out, I get 64 million. What is y'all's estimate of how much you think the tree situation by trimming and planting grass will be?
I am not putting a number out there. That I can guarantee you at this point. Well, no, let me go back. On that number of trees, the tree standing now is 64. We're taking down less than half. So 60,000 was the total number.
35 left, 29 left, almost half.
Well, almost half, but it's still less than half. 32 would be half.
Okay, so 60 million then?
Well, no, I don't know. I mean, and the bottom line is, as the doctor said, as the trees mature, the cost to do this action rises. It's not going to go down. Now, and I guess the factor, as the doctor brought up, do we want to manage the process so that we can have an impact aesthetically, or do we want nature to do it? Because nature's going to do it, and it's going to be random. So you may lose 62 of those trees eventually. Yes, right now it would be an annual assessment. We will have to flow a budget. We're not going to be able to do this. You know, this is going to be a multi-year undertaking. There's no doubt about that. We're going to have to prioritize the areas based on maturity, based on what we're seeing, based on what the doctor recommends in regards to his expertise. But you're absolutely right. This isn't going to be a small financial impact, and it's a long-term project. So basically, management's going to have to present to the board, here is the term of this, and I can't guess at this point, but 5, maybe 10 years. Every year we're looking annually to say these are the areas we're coming to, and that's probably what we're going to end up looking at. We're going to have to forecast the budget, take a look at what it will support, along with all the other things that we have to continually do. But some of the good news, reduced maintenance in regards to the tree trimmings, water consumption, and those sorts of things. So all of that will factor in. But at this point, we're just not at the point where I could give you that type of information. But we will. We absolutely will.
And if I could add one more thing to that. On this first project, we're going to pull out all stops to, see really what would be the maximum cost, and if we just did everything. What we're going to be looking at in the future is allowing grass to grow in. That's a very significant portion of the cost. We figured on this first one, that's probably wasn't a wise decision because people are waiting on things to get back to. Yes. That's right. And so there might be some sites where there's a little bit of grass, and maybe we let that fill in, others where we plant it. So we're looking at all of those options too. But on this first one, we want to make it as successful as possible.
I'm Leanne Taylor from Lakes Boston Park, and I have 2 questions. Number 1, what do y'all do with the trees that you remove? And number 2, could you possibly sell them and use, or what do you do, mulching or sell them for mulching or whatever? Could you use those funds to go back into this maintenance plan?
First of all, that's exactly what we're looking at. Either mulching them, we've already worked with the contractor to say we want the material left here in one form or another. Either firewood, which they will split, and we'll try to figure out where we can have that so residents can come get it on a first come, first serve, or maybe mulch in the areas where we do that. Now with mulch, if anybody knows, and the doctor can correct me if I misspeak, but you've got to let that sit for a while, because if you put it down right away, it breaks down so quickly the nitrogen level, or you'll end up killing whatever you put it on. So you have to have an area where you can let it sit for a while and turn it over. But that's absolutely what we're looking at. Did you have another question? You said 2. Is that?
Yeah, that was.
Okay. Oh, the tree? No, you're talking about a tree spade, taking the tree out and moving. It's possible to do that, yes, but that's not part of our plan. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Linda Casey. I'm from Oyster Point neighborhood. I've lived in First Colony since 1988. I really appreciate what FCCA is doing to address the problem. And I think that, as the lady in front spoke, that to try to save specimen trees and have fewer trees but more beautiful and healthy trees will add to our long-term appeal as a residential area. Thank you.
Okay, a couple more questions. Yes, sir?
Richard Rubin from Lakefield. That's quite a you and the board. I have a tree that's, man, it's pretty pathetic. It's like literally, it's being crowded out by the other two trees beside it. So it's going straight up and it really has no limbs, but a little bit of a crown, like literally about 5 feet of tabletop. If I remove that tree, will I get fined?
Without permission, probably. But just come to us. See us after the movie, after the meeting. Let me think. I'm thinking of a movie. It's going to be a movie. See, we're on TV. After this, and we'll get you the contact information. I've got one over here, and I'll come back for you. Next time we put the chairs closer together.
I'm Kate Kimball, and I live in Travis Park. My question is, what do they do if their grass is dying? What can they do now instead of waiting for your test in your personal yard? What can you do? Can you cut? I mean, like him, do you have to get permission to cut down a tree? What are they supposed to do to get beyond this?
I don't know. Really, what we need to do is have a conversation. Come to us, see us after the meeting, and staff, we will do everything we can to work with you. That I promise you. Some of these issues, we're going to have to delay. Essentially, the decision from my perspective would be to delay enforcement. Work with you to at least keep it looking as aesthetically pleasing, for lack of a better term, as we can. But if it meant that we have to authorize a tree removal and wait on a replacement, then maybe that makes the most sense, then maybe we do that. Again, I've got to get with the town and see what their requirements are too, so that we're in concert on this.
Well, within that, like within your individual neighborhood, and you have these trees in your front yard, and then you have these street trees that grow between your sidewalk and the street, is that going to be addressed beyond like these major areas? I mean, Palm Royale,
Yes.
I got Palm Royale encroaching on my yard, okay? And I've already called about that, and they told me, either you can have somebody trim it and be sure and follow our guidelines, or just lose your grass, which is kind of what I'm doing.
Well, Palm Royale is one of the areas that we are looking at. It's one of the areas, it needs the same type of work. And again, we're just trying to work through the phase. I need to have a conversation with the board. We've got to collectively get together and figure out how we approach this issue. Because it's community-wide, as we can see here tonight. Yes, ma'am? And then I've got...
My name is Annette Mullendor. I live in Colony Woods, enjoying the same problems that this lady is. Trees encroaching on my yard. I'm having them trimmed. I have to trim 5 trees that are now growing over my yard. Y'all know how much each one costs? And how much does each tree cost to trim right now when you pay for it?
Oh, for the ordinance?
Yeah.
It's like $30 a property or something?
What?
Right. It may be one.
Right. Yeah, you get what you pay for. It looks like it too. Also, so you're going to be...
It's in the travel time and getting someone else.
Okay, you're going to be testing in Edgewater. How long before you're going to start somewhere else like Palm Royal? How long? How many years?
I can't give you a timeline, but as we said, this is an issue that isn't going away. The reason we're having this meeting is we need the community to support what we're doing. That's the bottom line, okay? We're not going to get everybody, as Abraham Lincoln said, but we need to get a majority that supports these efforts. Once we have that, once we see that this is a viable option, which shouldn't take long, okay? We see the pictures. We already have the evidence this will work. Once the board is in a position where they feel, and they're responsible for this, they've got to basically take in what you feel about this, how do you support it or not, and then adjust accordingly. If we get the support, then I'm sure the staff is already doing, we're already laying it out going, here's the areas and here's the sequence, and here's how much it's going to cost. As you know, when you have a limited budget, and you don't want to raise assessments by doubling or tripling them, then we've got to manage that based on what the budget will hold. We have other issues. This community isn't young. We have other infrastructure that we've got to get to work on. Some of it, some of maintenance has been delayed for whatever reason, but we've got 11 pools, 11 complexes, that all factors into this mix. So we've got to manage it. I wish I could tell you it'd be, 2015 we'll get X, Y, and Z done. At this point, I can't. I can tell you that we need to get this in, get this done. Hopefully the community will support it once it's finished, and once we have that, then we can start planning. My intent would be to get it in that comprehensive master plan, go out 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and show you where we're going, and give you an idea of what it's going to cost. That's where we are. Okay, one more question, please. And if you, I'll be here afterwards. I'm sure the doctor will be here for a few minutes, so if you have more, we can get that done. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just struggling with one concept. Tom Burns, and I live in Lake Water. We talked about the term urban forest. We talked about maybe up to 30,000 tree removal in the end, out of 60,000 approximately, something like that. I'm struggling with the idea that we're talking about live oaks, and live oak wood is an extremely expensive and relatively rare wood. I'm being led to believe that no matter what time it is, the commercial value of these trees will never exceed the cost of removal. And I'm struggling, and I shuddered when I heard about the word mulching and firewood, when we have an urban forest here that could potentially be harvested for profit. Where is the break-even point in terms of age of these trees in which they actually become commercially viable to harvest?
I'll leave that to the doctor.
Yeah, we would do that if we could. For one thing, live oak is not a good timber species, because when you look at when they're growing things for timber, they tend to use white oaks, red oaks, things that grow tall and straight that you can make boards out of. It also has straight grain, not twisted grain like live oaks have. Live oaks tend to have value. We try to find as much value as you can. Tend to have value if they're historic for some reason, like what happened in Galveston after Hurricane Ida. Some of the trees actually went to go rebuild the ship that was built out of live oak. It was part of a historic ship, but as far as timber value, they're not typically used for timber. Now there are lots of different tree values, but timber values not one of them. But firewood, like I said, doesn't have a lot of value. Mulch doesn't have a lot of value, but it's not going into the landfill, and it's going back into the ecosystem when we're using mulch or providing a benefit for someone. So we have to do the best we can with that.
Right. But good question. Well, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. If you have any further questions or comments, please send them to us. You can get us on the website. We will respond, I promise, as quickly as we can. I want to thank Dr. Watson tonight. Great presentation. Thank you, sir. And where is Alice and Josh? Alice and Josh. Alice sets all this up. This is all her. Thank you, Alice. And thank you all for coming. I hope you have a great evening.